It was reported also, Mr. Ramsey, that shortly after you found your daughter's body, that you called the pilot of your plane to arrange a flight to Atlanta. Is that true?
What if everything you thought you knew about the JonBenét Ramsey case was just the tip of the iceberg? Beneath the headlines lie dark secrets and jaw-dropping facts that will shatter everything you believe. Brace yourself. What you're about to discover will blow your mind and haunt you long after this video ends. Ready to unlock the truth? Let's get started. A case that haunts America. On a cold Christmas morning in 1996, the peaceful town of Boulder, Colorado, was shaken by a tragedy that would haunt America for decades. JonBenét Ramsey, just 6 years old, was found dead in the basement of her home. Her father, John Ramsey, made the discovery hours after the family had reported her missing. JonBenét was a well-known child beauty queen, a bright and cheerful little girl whose smile had lit up pageant stages and captured hearts. That smile would soon become one of the most recognizable in America, but for the saddest of reasons. What followed was a storm of confusion, fear, and suspicion. The public watched in disbelief as the case unfolded with twist after twist. The early hours of the investigation were filled with chaos. People entered and left the Ramsey home freely, unintentionally disturbing the scene. Police officers, perhaps overwhelmed by the moment or misled by the initial circumstances, did not treat the house as a potential crime scene until it was too late. A major opportunity to collect key evidence was lost in those first crucial hours. The case took an even darker turn when suspicions began to fall on JonBenét's own family. The media quickly painted a picture that the Ramseys were not just grieving parents, but possible suspects. John and Patsy Ramsey, JonBenét's mother, faced intense public scrutiny. Their decision to speak through prepared statements and avoid certain interviews only added to the suspicion in the eyes of the public. Many asked why the family wouldn't talk openly. But in an interview years later, John Ramsey explained that they were simply following legal advice. "We were being treated like suspects, not victims," he said. "Every move we made was twisted into something else." The police, too, were under fire. As the months passed with no arrests, questions grew louder. Was this a case of mishandled evidence? Had authorities focused too heavily on one theory and ignored others? In a later interview with CNN, John Ramsey reflected on those days and expressed frustration at how little cooperation the Boulder police accepted from outside experts. "They were in over their heads," he said, "and they didn't want help." The truth may have slipped away in the very first hours. The crime scene was full of mistakes, serious ones that shaped the entire investigation. Let's walk through exactly what went wrong inside that house. A crime scene full of mistakes. When the police first arrived at the Ramsey house in Boulder, Colorado, they responded to a report of a missing child. At the time, it was treated as a possible kidnapping, not a homicide. Because of this, they made a critical decision. They sealed off only JonBenét's bedroom and allowed the rest of the house to remain open. The rest of the home, where the child had last been seen and where she was eventually found, was never properly secured. This decision opened the door to contamination, and that's exactly what happened. Throughout the morning, friends, family members, and even clergy were allowed to enter the home. Some came to support the Ramseys. Others arrived simply out of concern. While their presence was meant to offer comfort, it unknowingly damaged any chance of preserving a clean crime scene. People walked through rooms, touched surfaces, and even helped tidy up around the house. Food was prepared in the kitchen. Furniture was moved. Conversations echoed through the halls. In a moment when silence and precision were needed, the scene became chaotic. Detectives later admitted that this was a major error. Retired officer Linda Arndt, the lead detective on the scene that morning, described it as overwhelming. In later interviews, she said she felt like the only one truly treating the situation with the seriousness it required. "I was standing in the middle of a crime scene, and people were treating it like a family gathering," she recalled. Hours passed with no sign of JonBenét. Her mother, Patsy, had made the initial call to police shortly before 6 a.m. The family was told to remain calm and wait. But by the time the police began considering the possibility that JonBenét was still inside the home, it was too late. Evidence had already been touched, moved, or destroyed. Then, something happened that changed everything. Around 1 p.m., Detective Arndt suggested that John Ramsey search the house again, starting from top to bottom. John agreed. He went to the basement with a friend who had come to support the family. That was when he found JonBenét's body in a small, windowless room. She was lifeless, lying on the floor. What John did next would later be questioned by many. In shock, he picked up his daughter and carried her upstairs. While this action came from a place of love and panic, it also disturbed the body and the surrounding area. Another tragic complication in a scene already full of mistakes. The fact that the father of the victim found the body after police had already been present in the house for hours raised many eyebrows. Why hadn't the basement been thoroughly searched earlier? Why hadn't the family been separated and interviewed individually? Former Boulder Police Chief Mark Beckner later admitted in interviews that mistakes were made. "We were not as experienced with this kind of case," he said. "There were decisions made that, in hindsight, should have been different." He acknowledged that not searching the entire home immediately and not securing all areas were critical errors that may have cost them important evidence. Even the handling of JonBenét's body came under scrutiny. By removing her from the crime scene, John Ramsey, in his grief, unintentionally altered any chance of preserving key forensic details. Fingerprints, fibers, and other trace evidence that might have been present in the basement were likely lost during that moment. The police were left trying to piece together a puzzle that had already been scattered. Many believe that if the house had been properly secured and everyone had been kept out, the case might have turned out differently. The first few hours in any investigation are crucial. It is in those moments that the clearest evidence is collected and the strongest leads are found. In the Ramsey case, those hours were filled with confusion, comfort visits, and human error. The impact of these mistakes has lasted for decades. With no suspect arrested, theories have multiplied, and trust in the original investigation has continued to erode. For the public, it has been a case full of shadows. For the family, it has been a lifetime of pain and frustration. John Ramsey has spoken openly about those early moments, saying, "We didn't know what to do. We were waiting for the police to guide us, but it felt like no one was really in charge." His words reflect the helplessness that filled their home that day. Another big piece of the puzzle came in the form of a note, one that was as surprising as it was strange, leaving investigators and the public with more questions than answers. The ransom note that raised eyebrows. In most kidnapping cases, ransom notes are short, direct, and focused on demands. But the note found inside the Ramsey house was anything but ordinary. It stretched across 2.5 pages, filled with odd phrases, dramatic warnings, and highly specific instructions. From the moment it was discovered, it raised eyebrows, and for good reason. The note was written on paper from inside the Ramsey home. That fact alone confused investigators. If this was an outside intruder, why would they take the time to sit down, find a pad and pen, and write such a lengthy message inside the house where they had just committed a crime? This detail suggested that the person responsible either felt extremely comfortable inside the house or was never in a rush to leave. Some began to wonder if the note was left by someone already familiar with the Ramsey family, or, more disturbingly, someone inside the home. Experts who later reviewed the note were immediately struck by its language. It referenced things like a small foreign faction and used theatrical threats that sounded more like something from a movie script than a real-life criminal demand. Former FBI profiler Ron Walker spoke about the note in an interview years later, saying, "In all my years, I have never seen a ransom note like this. It was bizarre. It read more like a screenplay than a genuine threat." The style and tone were not just odd, they were suspicious. Then came the most unusual detail of all. The amount of money demanded in the note was precisely $118,000. That number was not a random figure. It was the exact amount of the Christmas bonus that John Ramsey had recently received from his company. Investigators found this coincidence nearly impossible to ignore. How could a stranger know that amount? Was it someone from John's workplace? Or was it someone even closer? Many saw this detail as a clue that the person who wrote the note had intimate knowledge of the Ramsey family's financial life. The more closely experts looked, the more problems they found. Handwriting analysts examined the note carefully. They were trying to determine if either John or Patsy Ramsey had written it. Patsy's handwriting, in particular, was heavily scrutinized. She submitted multiple samples for analysis. While the results were never officially declared as conclusive, several experts said the handwriting could not be ruled out as hers. This only deepened public suspicion, even though there was never enough evidence to charge either parent. Adding to the mystery was a reported discovery by one of the detectives who reviewed the notepad used for the ransom letter. He found what appeared to be a partial draft, just the beginning of a sentence that looked like someone had started writing the note and then stopped. If this was true, it meant the author may have practiced or started over, again suggesting a level of comfort and time that didn't make sense for a typical home invasion. These strange details created a storm of speculation. Was the note a cover-up? Was it written to distract from the real motive or to buy time? Or was it, as some believed, staged to steer the investigation in the wrong direction? Theories flourished in media reports and online forums, but no clear answers ever emerged. For the Ramsey family, the ransom note became another painful reminder of how their lives had been turned upside down. In interviews years later, John Ramsey expressed his disbelief at how quickly the note turned into a weapon against them. "We were hoping it would help the police find whoever did this," he said, "but instead, it made people look at us like we were hiding something." That sense of being judged by their every move would follow the Ramseys for years. The note also shaped how the case was handled by law enforcement. Some detectives believed the odd language and inside knowledge pointed to someone in the family. Others thought it could be an outsider trying to make it look like an inside job. This divide in opinion created tension within the investigation, slowing progress and making cooperation between the police and the Ramseys even more difficult. As if the strange note wasn't baffling enough, even more shocking details began to surface, this time through the quiet but powerful science of DNA. DNA clues and cold trails. Years after JonBenét Ramsey's death, when much of the public had given up hope of answers, a new breakthrough seemed to bring the case back to life. In 2003, forensic experts were able to develop a DNA profile from a small trace of blood found on JonBenét's underwear. It was a critical moment. This DNA didn't match any member of the Ramsey family. It didn't belong to her father John, her mother Patsy, or her brother Burke. It came from someone else entirely. For a case that had long been overshadowed by suspicion toward the family, this discovery felt like a major shift. It offered the first solid proof that an unknown individual may have been involved in JonBenét's death. Investigators entered the DNA profile into CODIS, the national database used by the FBI to track known offenders. They hoped that the system would return a match, and lead them straight to the person responsible. But the database had no answers. The profile didn't match anyone. Not then, and not now. This result was frustrating, but it also deepened the mystery. Who was this person? How had their DNA ended up on a 6-year-old girl's clothing? And why couldn't they be found in any criminal records? The DNA raised the possibility of a stranger's involvement. Someone outside the house. Someone who may have slipped in and out without leaving any obvious trace, except for this small but damning clue. Then, in 2016, the case took another surprising turn. Advanced DNA testing, more precise than anything available in earlier years, revealed something even more unsettling. Scientists found not just one unknown profile, but genetic material from 2 different unidentified individuals. That meant that at least 2 separate people had left traces on evidence connected to JonBenét's death. The story suddenly grew darker and more complicated. If one unidentified person was troubling, 2 was downright chilling. This discovery raised even more questions about what really happened in the Ramsey house. Did more than one person enter the home that night? Were they working together? Or were these profiles from completely separate contacts, introduced somehow before or after JonBenét's death? Investigators could not say for certain. What they did confirm, however, was that neither of these DNA profiles matched anyone in CODIS. Once again, science had brought the case closer to answers, but stopped just short of solving it. As testing continued, investigators found even more troubling evidence. In total, 6 separate DNA samples were discovered on various pieces of JonBenét's clothing and other items. All 6 profiles belonged to unknown individuals. None of them matched anyone in the Ramsey family. None of them matched each other. And none of them, even with today's more powerful tools, have ever been linked to a known suspect. These findings confused even the most seasoned experts. Bob Grant, a former district attorney who supported the investigation for many years, expressed how vital the DNA findings had become. Any resolution to this case, he said in a public statement, has to explain how and why that DNA is there. We can't ignore it. His comments echoed the thoughts of many who had followed the case for years. The DNA wasn't just an afterthought. It was the center of the mystery now. Some experts have suggested that the presence of multiple DNA profiles could be the result of contamination. Forensic pathologist Michael Baden, for example, explained in interviews that tiny amounts of DNA can sometimes be transferred unintentionally. He pointed out that trace DNA can appear on clothing or objects without direct contact. It's a theory that has been used in other cases to explain unexplained DNA, but not everyone agrees. Former FBI profiler Candice DeLong has remained firm in her belief that the repeated appearance of the same DNA in multiple places is not a coincidence. In her view, the consistency of one particular profile, found on JonBenét's clothing and other items, strongly suggests it belonged to the person responsible. It's not just one piece of DNA in one place, she said. It's on different items. That means something. For John Ramsey, the DNA discoveries brought a mix of hope and frustration. On one hand, it helped prove that someone outside the family had likely been involved. On the other, the fact that no match had been found even after all these years was deeply disappointing. In a 2023 interview, he expressed his determination to keep pushing authorities to use the latest genetic genealogy tools, the same technology that solved the Golden State Killer case. "It's our best chance," he said. "If the police use everything that's available now, we might finally get the answer." With all the unanswered questions surrounding the DNA, a chilling thought began to take hold. Was this the work of a stranger who slipped through unnoticed? Or was the truth hidden much closer to home? Stranger danger or family secrets? One theory that gained traction was that Burke had killed his sister in a fight over something trivial, possibly a snack or toy, and that his parents covered it up to protect him from the consequences. Supporters of this theory pointed to JonBenét's injuries and to Burke's reported behavior during interviews, which some described as unusual or emotionally flat. But the theory had one major problem. In 2008, long after the initial wave of public suspicion, the Boulder district attorney officially cleared all 3 family members. DNA evidence showed that someone outside the family had left genetic material on JonBenét's clothing. The Ramseys' relief was mixed with sorrow, especially since Patsy passed away in 2006, before she could see her name cleared. Despite the official clearance, whispers of doubt continued. Online forums and amateur investigators kept digging, raising questions that the public could not seem to let go of. Meanwhile, law enforcement continued to chase leads outside the family, some of which were as bizarre as they were heartbreaking. In 2006, a man named John Mark Carr was arrested in Thailand after contacting a journalist and claiming he was responsible for JonBenét's death. He spoke in disturbing detail about the case and claimed to have been with her the night she died. Carr's confession sent shockwaves through the media. For a moment, it seemed like the mystery might be over. But it didn't take long for holes to appear in his story. His timeline didn't match up, and his DNA didn't match the samples found at the crime scene. Eventually, Carr was dismissed as a false confessor, a man who inserted himself into a tragedy for reasons that remain unclear. The moment was devastating for the Ramseys. They had been promised resolution, only to be dragged back into the fog of uncertainty. Then came the name Gary Oliva. A convicted sex offender living in Boulder at the time of JonBenét's death, Oliva quickly became a person of interest due to his disturbing behavior and fixation on the case. He reportedly kept photos of JonBenét and his belongings and had once been seen near the Ramsey house. In later interviews, John Ramsey admitted he was deeply suspicious of Oliva. "He was obsessed with our daughter," John said. "It was unsettling, and it felt personal." Still, despite the disturbing connections, Oliva's DNA did not match the evidence collected from the crime scene. He was ruled out as a suspect, though his name continues to appear in conversations about the case. Another strange and dark twist came with the death of Michael Helgoth, a young man who worked as an electrician and lived near Boulder. Helgoth had once been involved in a property dispute with someone connected to the Ramseys and reportedly owned boots that matched a footprint found at the scene. Even more troubling, he had access to a stun gun, something investigators believed might have been used on JonBenét. Just 2 days after law enforcement announced they were close to identifying a suspect, Helgoth was found dead from what appeared to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The timing was so suspicious that many began to wonder if his death was more than just coincidence. A private investigator hired by the Ramseys even claimed that Helgoth had motive and means, and urged police to look deeper. Still, like Oliva, Helgoth's DNA didn't match. He was never officially named a suspect. With so many possible suspects ruled out by science, and so many theories left without answers, the lines between stranger danger and family secrets became blurred. The public didn't know who to trust. Was this a case of a horrible accident, covered up by loving parents trying to protect their child? Or had a stranger truly broken in, done the unthinkable, and vanished without a trace? John Ramsey, speaking years later, said the pain of being wrongly accused never fades. "We were grieving, and the world was accusing us of something we didn't do. That's a weight no one should have to carry." As for Burke, he has largely stayed out of the spotlight, living a private life far from the cameras and questions. In the rare interviews he has given, he has always denied involvement and insisted on his innocence. Let's take you back now to the early days of a bright and innocent girl whose life ended far too soon before she even had the chance to bloom. A little girl behind the headlines. JonBenét Patricia Ramsey was born on August 6th in 1990 in Atlanta, Georgia. Her name was a blend of her father's first and middle names, JonBenét. It was a unique name for a child who would quickly capture attention wherever she went. The Ramseys were a close-knit family. John Ramsey was a successful businessman, and Patsy Ramsey, JonBenét's mother, had once been a beauty queen herself. Patsy's love for pageants and performance soon became something she shared with her daughter, and JonBenét took to it naturally. From a young age, JonBenét showed a sparkle that others couldn't ignore. Whether she was at school, at home, or on stage, she carried a presence far beyond her years. Her teachers described her as sweet and smart. Her friends said she was kind and fun to be around. She was the kind of child who lit up a room simply by walking into it. Like many little girls, JonBenét loved dressing up and putting on performances. She began taking dance classes, learning ballet and jazz, and participating in local shows. It didn't take long before she was ready for something more. By the time she was 6, JonBenét was already a rising star in the world of child beauty pageants. With her mother's help, she entered local and national competitions. Her bright blue eyes, golden hair, and confident stage presence made her stand out. She wasn't just there to be seen, she wanted to shine. And she did. JonBenét won multiple titles, including Little Miss Colorado, National Tiny Miss Beauty, and America's Royal Miss. Her performances often included singing and dancing, and she was known for her ability to stay poised in front of large crowds, even under pressure. To her family, these pageants were just a fun way for JonBenét to express herself. Patsy often described their pageant journey as a shared hobby, a way for mother and daughter to bond. In interviews, Patsy said JonBenét loved being on stage and that it gave her joy. She enjoyed it so much, Patsy said in one interview. She loved the costumes, the music, the attention. It made her happy. Videos from those years show JonBenét smiling brightly, waving at the audience, and delivering polished routines with a grace rare for someone so young. But as JonBenét's trophies grew, so did the attention, and not all of it was kind. After her death, images of her in full pageant makeup and elaborate outfits were broadcast across news channels and plastered on magazines. Many people who had never heard of child pageants before suddenly had strong opinions. Critics argued that the pageants were too adult, too focused on appearance, and questioned whether young girls should be dressed and presented that way. Others felt that JonBenét's involvement in pageants may have drawn the wrong kind of attention. Still, those who knew her best insisted that the real JonBenét was a normal little girl. Away from the stage, she was silly and playful. She liked playing with dolls, watching cartoons, and helping decorate the house for the holidays. Christmas was her favorite time of year, and she was especially excited for it in 1996. According to family friends, she had been talking for weeks about what Santa might bring. No one could have imagined that just hours after Christmas morning, everything would change forever. The pain that never healed. The pain that followed JonBenét Ramsey's tragic death did not stop with her. It stayed with her family, especially her older brother, Burke Ramsey. He was only 9 years old when his little sister was found dead in the basement of their home. What should have been a time of innocence and healing turned into a life shadowed by suspicion, silence, and trauma. From the earliest days of the investigation, Burke found himself in the middle of intense media speculation. Though police did not consider him a suspect at the time, The public and media latched onto theories that placed him at the center of the crime. Some claimed he may have hurt JonBenét during a sibling argument and that their parents covered it up to protect him. These theories were widely circulated, fueled by tabloid headlines and television shows that analyzed his every expression and interview clip. Even though DNA evidence later cleared all members of the Ramsey family, including Burke, the damage had already been done. Rumors refused to die down. Online forums, documentaries, and armchair investigators continued to point fingers at him long after he was officially ruled out. The idea of a child being labeled a possible killer, even without proof, left lasting scars. In 2016, CBS aired a television special titled The Case of JonBenét Ramsey, which reignited the public's focus on Burke. The show featured a panel of experts who floated the theory that Burke might have been responsible for JonBenét's death. This time, Burke fought back. He filed a $750 million defamation lawsuit against CBS, claiming the show had falsely accused him and caused irreparable harm to his reputation. The case was eventually settled privately in 2019, but Burke has kept his life very private since then. According to close family sources, he avoids all coverage, never watches documentaries, and won't even allow her name to be brought up in conversation. If anyone mentions JonBenét, he shuts down completely, one insider shared. It's clear that the trauma never left him. For Burke Ramsey, the tragedy is not just a cold case. It's a lifelong wound that never truly healed. The JonBenét Ramsey case still leaves us with more questions than answers. What do you think really happened that night? Share your thoughts in the comments below.